monetizing AI, it's almost like a matter of survival for many companies today. And at the same time, AI credits, they're spreading like wildfire. And, they look like a potential response to that crisis. What's interesting is that in my research, I found that more than 30% of offers, AI offers, are already leveraging AI credits. Problem is, too many companies don't know if it's for them or not for them, and others actually do it by default. And at the same time, credits can quickly become a source of frictions with customers. And very often customers are not pushing back on the price points. They're actually pushing back because they don't understand exactly what credits are, how much they're going to pay for the credits or how much they're going to pay in the future for credits. Or they're simply pushing back because your credit model isn't perceived as flexible or fair. And that's why credit model breaks. As we've all noticed, right, AI changed dramatically software unit economics, especially on the cost side. Costs are of course variable, and the marginal cost is not going towards zero. It's almost linear because of that, right? The inference are going up. The reasoning depth is increasing, compute intensity is increasing. So, at the same time, AI capabilities are becoming increasingly diverse, and there's new features being shipped almost in real time. In parallel, usage patterns of these capabilities are unpredictable, and customers often are unable to actually forecast their future usage. When you combine all these factors, that's exactly the kind of situation where credits thrive. It's trust. Credit models, they're not a pricing tactic or mechanism. They're a trust system. If a user cannot understand or predict or just, simply be sure that the credits that they just bought have value or are going to have value, then you break that trust. And when that trust breaks, then usage drops and churn rises, and that's where credit can go wrong. Failure number one is cognitive overload. Think of it, right? If you have a credit model with too many rates, as in, how much it costs to consume an action, for example, how many credits it uses, or if you have complex weighting systems or many rules, then very often it creates unnecessary complexity. And of course, companies often do that not out of pleasure, but they do it in order to probably cover their costs. However, the users, very often they don't know or they don't care exactly what is the cost of an action. What they care about is the value they get. So too much complexity can easily and quickly lead to usage paralysis, which is what you don't want. So to keep it super simple, if it requires a PhD to understand your credit model, then it's broken. The second type of failure is the lack of visibility. Very often we see companies having delayed or unclear reporting of credits. They don't really enable the customers to track in real time what's the consumption level of credits. They don't understand what credits really consume. So the users feel like they're losing control over spend. And that leads to surprise invoices and frictions with finance teams. And we all know that finance do not like surprises, except maybe at Christmas. So, the key insight is that credits without visibility and transparency, it really feels like a black box tax, and you're going to move to a glass box model. The third failure mode is really focusing on creating a vendor-centric design. What do I mean by that? Let's imagine, right? You have very rigid expiration dates. You have a use it or lose it, which makes sense, but maybe it's way too quick, let's say within the month. Or you actually have no rollover of unused credits or zero flexibility in the way you manage credits. Sometimes, you have forced upgrades or only top-ups, or even actually absence of top-ups. On that specific part, right, my research showed that as of today, more than half of the offers I surveyed actually had no top-up mechanisms. So if you want to buy more, then you can't. You just have to wait till the next period. And all this lack of flexibility and vendor-centric design leads to, again, unused credits that end up expiring too quickly and being useless. It leads to frustration. It leads to churn risk ultimately. So, if you have a model where you're over-optimizing for revenue breakage, as in, making money from unused credits, doesn't really sound like a good business to be in. A cool example would be Cursor, because they, are at the same time a cautionary tale, but also they reacted very swiftly and positively. So they moved from a simple subscription with limits towards a credit-based model. When they did it, they didn't really have a very clear and broad communication. They did not provide widely predictability tools. So people could not really, fathom what it would mean. So what happened is that many users actually hit their credit limits very quickly and unexpectedly. That led, as you can imagine, to frictions, backlashes, frustration. So the good news is that Cursor actually responded rapidly, transparently. They actually, even, try to course correct with these users, which helped restore trust. So for me, the key takeaway is that the pricing change itself was not the issue. It was really the way it was done, the transparency, the predictability that was not good enough to actually ensure a smooth transition. The best credit models, they actually prioritize clarity, visibility, flexibility, or continuity. The users, they need simple exchange logic. They need to have real-time visibility into their user, their spend. They need, as we mentioned, flexible mechanisms like rollovers, top-ups, alerts, to reduce frictions, to avoid bill shock. So they need to be in control. And in fact, credit systems right now, we can say that they are in their infancy stage. So they're going to be changing consistently in order to adapt all the mechanisms that we discussed. And again, what works today may not work tomorrow. A best-in-class company in that space, in my view, would be HubSpot. They're a good example about giving admins visibility, users visibility, control, overage management directly in the product. What I found also super interesting is that they recently introduced outcome-based credit models alongside what they had before, which would be an action-based credits, depending on the type of actions. So one of the key takeaway I would share is the best credit system has to feel predictable, not restrictive. Credits don't fail because of pricing. They fail because of poor design, poor communication, and poor transparency. And that's not just monetization, right? It's really the customer experience. So, something I like to share is credits don't just measure usage, they are a trust currency.